Hello, everyone. Welcome to the series that we have dubbed 10 Questions With, or welcome back if you've joined us before. And if you haven't, on this series, we actually sit down with entrepreneurs and business leaders to talk about their journey and to give us some advice from that journey, the lessons they've learned along the way, to help all of us in our journeys too. Now, today we will be joined by Ashley Merrill. She is the CEO and founder of Lunya, a luxury sleepwear brand for the modern woman. Merrill will explain how she's navigated the company's doubled growth year over year, overcome hiring challenges at various stages of that growth, and how Lunya exudes a sense of exceptional quality and trust in every product and every customer touch point. Before we invite her on, I want to remind all of you to please participate with us. Ask questions by commenting, and we'll get to them at the end of today's conversation. And if you don't have any questions, just drop a hello. Tell us where you're tuning in from. We'd love to shout out right back to you. Now, without further ado, please join me in a very warm, albeit virtual, welcome for Ashley Merrill. Hi, Ashley. How are you?
Oh, thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. I gave our viewers a little bit of insight into Lunya, but I always love to put our founders on the spot. What's your Lunya elevator pitch?
Well, because Lunya was founded from a very personal need, it's a little easier for me because I can relate to wearing my husband's old clothes around the house. And so Lunya was sort of the answer to that for me. It's the clothes where kind of respecting my quality time, this time at home, with really quality products that function well and make me feel like my best, even when I'm in my off hours, so to speak.
Yeah, for sure. Now, that doesn't count as one of our 10 questions. So let's dive into those now, starting with question number 1. I want to take it back to that light bulb moment you kind of just alluded to, but the moment that you came up with this idea for Lunya, what brought you to this realization, and then what gave you the confidence to take this idea and actually turn it into something real?
Yeah, and I like that you highlight that as two separate things, because for me they really were. Certainly I had the idea because, like I said, I related to the customer. I was wearing my husband's old clothes, and I realized I was doing that in an effort to be comfortable, but in so doing, I was kind of like disregarding that time, wearing things that didn't actually make me feel my best, even though maybe they were comfortable. And so it kind of highlighted an opportunity for me, but that wasn't actually the moment I decided to go for it. Actually, I went, ooh, maybe that's interesting. And then I proceeded to tell myself 100 reasons why I shouldn't do that, because I didn't have the background in fashion. I wasn't sure that that was really a good idea. Does the world need it? One of those questions. Will people like it? And all, the 1,000 questions that go through probably everybody's mind before they start something. And I didn't start it until a little bit later. I actually had started business school, and I had assumed I was going to be joining somebody else's startup, or maybe pairing up with somebody to do a business more like the industry I had come from. And so what happened was I started business school. I ended up getting pregnant, and I thought, if I don't do this now, I'm just never going to do it. And then how am I going to tell my kids that I didn't do the thing that I was really, I believed in, because I was afraid? I'd rather do it and fail than not do it at all. And so this sort of risk equation changed for me weirdly when I got pregnant. And so that was actually the thing that threw me over. I had a lot of validation by that point. I felt like it was good, but I needed that last thing to kind of come into place for me to take the final risk.
Yeah, that's a great point, and super interesting. I love hearing that. And I love that you built the company around this idea of odium, which I'm going to let you explain to our viewers. But I also want you to add to that, why is this concept so important to the foundation of Lunya's mission? Like, why does it work so well for the brand?
Yeah, I think odium, so first off, let me say what odium is. Odium is a Latin term, and it actually means kind of roughly leisure time. And the reason I liked the word is most of our expressions that we had for this time of day position it as off hours, or sort of the time in between, or kind of position this as the secondary time in your life. What was cool about odium that I really liked and resonated with me is there's odium, which is the leisure time, and then there's non-Odium, which is your time that you do things like work or other productive tasks that need to be done. And so I like it because it kind of reshifts that hierarchy that I think that a lot of us feel, where our lives are maybe owned by or driven by our professional pursuits or the things we have to do on our to-do list. And it kind of like shifts it on its head a little bit. So I love this Odium term. I think Odium has become more important in our lives. Honestly, it was one of those things that felt important to me early days, in that it showed up in a way that maybe even at the time I couldn't articulate. I used to say, why do we spend $250 on a cocktail dress that you're going to wear a handful of times, and yet we won't invest in anything nice for this time around the people that frankly probably mean the most to us, in our most intimate time with those people that we care about, and we're probably going to get far more uses out of. And it's an interesting challenge to what we value and where we spend our money and kind of what we put our emphasis on. So I always kind of highlighted that. And then I think what happened is, as time's gone on and cell phones have taken up more of our lives, I think that productivity time has sort of, without even knowing it, a bit overtaken all of that leisure time. We're always thinking about making our day efficient, or kind of like, can I get that Amazon order in time for the cutoff? And all the things that we're doing in our head, just like, and I use that like rat on a wheel kind of metaphor, because I think we all know that feeling like you're on this treadmill. I think we have to step off sometimes. I mean, look, society, if you look at it right now, there's a lot of struggle with mental health issues and how people, just overall kind of like a negative sentiment, despite actually a lot of maybe more economic prosperity. And I think there's a really big divide there, because I do think there's like a deprioritization of how people feel, or enjoyment of life, over just viewing ourselves as this like machine. And so very important to me from a Lunya perspective, because while our clothes, hang their hat on sleep, in that they're like absolute best in class product to sleep in, I find that once you wear Lunya or Logo, the men's brand, you will find yourself wearing it all the time, especially right now. All of us are working from home, but you'll find yourself wearing it from the moment you get home from work to the end of the day, often on the weekend. And so I feel like this is the clothes, these are the uniform that you show up to your Odium time with.
Yeah, I love that, because I think also something that we, people always assume like, oh, your best moments happen when you're traveling or when you're out and about doing a lot or whatever. And something that we've all learned this year is like, some of your best moments can come right in the confines of your own home, relaxing, or, reading, or spending time with your family or significant other. And I think, it's so important to feel good while these moments are happening too. We always think that they're supposed to happen outside, but they can happen right here, right? So I love that.
Yeah.
Now, you describe your products as exceptionally crafted and trustworthy. That's something we've been hearing as a standout trait for a brand, especially with the influx of e-commerce over the past year: trust. How do you build trust with your customer in each of your products and in every experience or touch point? How do you build Odium into all of that?
Yeah. Well, I'll say this: trust is not perfection. So I kind of put that out there, which is, I think there's this new world where, people love to call out companies for any of their flaws or products. Look, what to me trust is a company that really takes it seriously and has set a high bar for themselves to evolve and improve it. I have a lot of products that have been with me for a number of years, and they're constantly, this is an art, we're taking in feedback, we're tweaking these products. It's one of the gifts in my mind of not being in the fast fashion business, is instead of to recreate something every season anew, it's not like that, right? I'm creating sleepwear that should be, these are your go-to products that you can wear every night. So I have this opportunity. I've been refining these for years, everything down to stitching, to the fit, to the everything, and everything is a work in progress. But I think that a lot of that is, to me, that's where the trust comes from, is I'm intending to make an incredibly high quality garment for you, and that I'm testing my fabrics at like really high standards. I'm beginning to push into sustainability, which is really exciting. So there's an aspect of building a trustworthy product, which is a product that you hope has great QC, that you hope has great fit, that is very thoughtfully designed. And frankly, when mistakes happen or when something happens, a company that feels responsive, that is supporting you and getting you to the right product. So to me, those are really those are, product-oriented trust. And then I think there's company-oriented trust, which is like, this company that is doing its best to kind of be a good citizen of the world. And that's also an evolving part too. I think sustainability was not even an option for us early on. When you're a small producer, you're just lucky that anyone will say yes to you. Over time, as you can start to ask your manufacturers, hey, could we start to be talking about fair wage, and how could I help you get your standards up? And can we start using blue sign dyes? And can we use more organic based fabrics? And so these are the kinds of things that, over time, I think a good company, and this is not necessarily from a customer facing point of view, but a company that seeks to be this sort of good citizen of the world should try to evolve for naturally, not really as a marketing pitch, but as something that, a trustworthy individual would do too.
Yeah, for sure. Those are all very great points. I'm curious, how has all of this kind of evolved and transformed over the past year? Like, did you experience any disruptions in your supply chain that forced you to modify or take a new approach to your products? Like you said, you've continued to evolve them year over year, but did last year impact any of that? And if so, how did that impact your, what you did on the customer experience side?
Yeah, last year was a crazy year. I mean, just like riding a roller coaster. That's what it's been like. And it was, it started in March with very scary drop in sales. I mean, to be honest, we went down to a third of what we should have been doing and had to close our retail stores. And so like everybody else, we got faced with a pandemic where they were describing layoffs or unemployment that was going to be higher than depression levels. And we watched our drop into a third. So that's where we started out in March. And that was pretty scary. And I should say, before that, we were having supply chain issues because it did hit earlier in China. And we do manufacture some of our silks and things out of China. And we were getting some delays and beginning to balance it. But I think at that point, we didn't realize this was going to be such a global situation. We thought it was maybe going to be more of an isolated situation in China. And our partners had been managing it pretty tightly. So we were working around delays, but they were minor at that point. We were just juggling. We manufacture all over the world, in Peru and China and Taiwan and in the US. And so we just would kind of like lean a little more on some of our other manufacturers. And we pictured it being a little more isolated. And then what happened was in March, when it was like, okay, it's here, I think that caused a different kind of challenge for us. So instead of just being a supply chain, which is easier to juggle, we obviously experienced some of this sharp decline. Now, and then I think what happened was in April, after things had settled down a little while, we started to see an uptick. I think we're going to be home for a while, and so suddenly we had the right product to have. And so, it was like this all year long. And I mean, the election, then, we were competing online with Politico ads. And so that created another drop in revenue. And then we had a killer holiday. So if I drew you a graph of like what happened last year, it would look like we're psychopaths. And, I said to my team, like, okay, my takeaway is I need to invest in a crystal ball, because that would be out if I could have just known what's going to happen. But yeah, a lot of changes. And then as it relates to product, some product changes, but not a drastic amount. And, we've had people even ask us if it created a different kind of popular selling structure. And it actually, I think our best sellers, we kind of doubled down on some of those. And I think some of that relates to the fact that we were still operating in a kind of fearful mode, even though because having a drop like that, I mean, we had to do layoffs, we had to do all kinds of things. Like everybody was, we figured our business we were going to hang on, in March. Yeah. So when April came back, I was not ready to be like, oh yeah, this is awesome. Let's invest in innovation and grow all of our product line. We were playing it a little bit safe from a product standpoint last year, just because, I mean, I'd never seen anything like that, to be honest.
Right, for sure. So, come April and then come holiday season, when you saw kind of that uptick in sales, how did you manage order volume and fulfillment at that point, especially having, laid off part of your team and so on and so forth?
Yeah, I would say as I mentioned, we're manufacturing all over the world. Some are shorter lead time than others. And actually during parts of last year, Peru was very heavily hit. And Peru's where our fine wool comes from, our cotton comes from. And so actually we were sold out because we couldn't replan of different product sets throughout the year. You know, there were times when we didn't have silk from China. It was times when we didn't have Peru and wool from Peru. And so a lot of it was just trying to juggle, you know, where could we at least go a little heavier in silk then while we're not going to have the Pima cottons, and just, it wasn't a perfect assortment build, which is how I would normally do it, is what's our optimal and how do we want to, so some of it was like, what can we get? And then the other thing, we had to lay heavier into our manufacturers that had a shorter lead time, because with the unpredictability of last year, I couldn't predict, like normally I can say, oh, 6 months out, I think roughly we're going to be here. We have a really strong product merch, planning merch team. And so usually that's the kind of thing that they can predict. But, you know, last year was anybody's guess. And so the shorter the lead time, the closer to market we were able to place orders. And so leaned more heavily on those manufacturers.
Yeah. Now kind of segueing into more of your growth period, you grew 400% year over year in your early days and are still doubling in growth year over year today. What would you call out as one of the company's biggest growing pains to date, and how have you navigated that?
I'd say people and organization is absolutely the hardest part of the business. And I'd say it's hard because it's constantly changing. I think to build a good org, you need to be able to be a bit forward thinking. Where are we going to be a year from now, 2 years from now? What's the org that I'm going to need? But then it's tricky because you can't always hire that person that you think you're going to need 2 years from now. That can be an inappropriate hire for today, but you don't want to hire someone that you don't see a future path for. So the juggling act of trying to get the needs you have today solved, build growth for your team wherever possible, and then kind of set yourself up for the org that you need to have in the future. It's hard. That's incredibly challenging because these are also people and not robots. So there's also a lot of like, you know, you're working within people where their growth pathing is, and are what you need as a company, is that lining up with what they're going to need, and are those paths aligning, and is the timing right? I mean, the amount of variables is crazy to me on the people side. If you take a company that's doubling, if you look at it, you know, 1 year to the next, it has twice the needs. And so that needed, you know, one particular part of the organization solved. Maybe they fix that. Well, now I need something completely new. Can this person evolve fast enough, one, to keep their job, and also fast enough to grow within their job at a company that is growing at that pace? It's really challenging.
Yeah, kind of with that. So how would you say your approach to hiring transformed, you know, from the early days to kind of the middle and to where you are today? And what lessons would you impart on other founders or entrepreneurs from that?
Yeah. Early days, I would say, I just was chatting with somebody this morning. We were talking about the different stages of the company, and it does seem like there's kind of roughly 3 stages, some of which I haven't hit yet, but just as I'm chatting with other people. The early stage, this sort of survival mode, you need to pick people that are emotionally all in. They're just committed, they're mission aligned, they'll do what it takes. And they're generalists, right? So they're people that are kind of willing to learn what they don't know. And I was very lucky in the early days. I had some great people with me that were those kind of people. Like they could step in, they could go, I call it shallow and wide. You know, they could cover a lot of territory. As a company grows, people's roles, it gets narrower, not smaller, but narrower and deeper. And so what transition from a generalist kind of a hire, very passion oriented, everyone's like, they want to be buddy with you, and like it's a human connection, and that's why they're there. Then you need to move into a different zone where you have kind of a lot of generalists, and they're starting to be more bought into the mission and the business and where it's going. And then that next phase being much more about like, you're starting to get professional leadership and specialists. So you're hiring people that are like, hey, I maybe cover this very narrow area, but I go really deep. And I think one of the challenges when we talk about the hiring change, and even just the transition for the existing employee base, is sometimes people, if they don't grow with the company, it doesn't always mean that there's something wrong with the company or with the individual. Some people just thrive in an environment where there's 10 people in a room and they can spread their wings wide and feel like they touch a lot of things. That's awesome. We need those people for early stage businesses, but if you want to scale with a company, you start to have to build a more narrow, deeper expertise so that you can scale with them. Not everybody likes that. And so that also creates a lot of change within an organization, because this original guard has to change, or maybe doesn't evolve with the business. And I think that's hard for everybody involved, right? I think that's hard for the existing employees who, the employees that are there, because they start looking around being like, is there something wrong? Why is there turnover? And then I think it's hard for them who are feeling like, what's wrong? I don't feel like this is my home anymore, this fellow. And I think that's natural. I mean, I invest in a lot of businesses, work with a lot of startups and kind of middle stage companies. And I think this is so common, but it doesn't mean it's not painful. And so I think when we talk about hiring and just managing these teams, and I think hiring certainly changes. What I'm looking for is very different as the company gets bigger, and then I am looking for people with deep expertise. And I'm also looking for people to show up with a different kind of experience. So small company, I may be more okay with them not having like maybe they have an atypical background, they're coming in, wide. As we get, to a more mature business, I may be hiring somebody who came from a more sophisticated organization that has good people development training programs. And I'm looking for that person to bring that into the company. So I'm kind of hiring people that maybe have worked at more corporate organizations, and trying to find those individuals that can keep the edge that is Lunya and kind of keep the work well and is still relatively hands-on, but can bring in something new so that they're going to help us grow too,
Yeah. This is actually a great intro to kind of my final question in this hiring realm that we're in right now, especially with remote workforce and remote hiring. I read that you actually know within 3 minutes of a phone call if someone is right for Lunya. One of the biggest challenges we're all facing right now is this idea of like remote hiring and how to do it right, and how to make sure that these new hires are coming in and that they're feeling comfortable and that they are really the right fit. So how do you do it? I mean, what advice do you have for other leaders who are facing this right now, who have never been through this before?
So maybe what I would say is, instead of knowing that they're right, I know if they're wrong. Maybe that would be
good point.
I think it's harder to be like, oh yes, this is the person. But what I do when I'm hiring, if we're going to get really tactical, is I usually set, if it's a more junior employee, I set 15-minute meetings, intro meetings with people, and I will do tons of them. I use Calendly to just book them all back to back, and I do tons of 15-minute calls, because there's a weed out process that I can do. And the way I can do that is, we have values that are like key to our organization. So for us, entrepreneurship is a value. So this idea of an ownership mindset, somebody who can think instead of going, hey, can you give me the budget? I'm not saying I won't give someone a budget, but a lot of my budget comes from, well, what are the results you think you can get? Because my budget's bigger if you can give me higher results, because I'm ROI minded. So it's more of this, like, can you think like a business owner within whatever area of the business you're in? So entrepreneurship. Team is another one. Is this an I person, or is this a team person? And I think that you can usually tell right away based on how they position their prior experience or themselves within the success of the prior organization. Growth. In an organization that's doubling year over year, you need someone with a growth mindset. So somebody that look to, and that's tricky, because I think that, like I said, everyone needs to grow. Everyone will grow over time. But I'm doubling year over year. So I need people that are like a sponge, and not people that are going to just rely on me to do it for them. So to some extent, it's like, hey, what do you need to know? Where are you going, and what do you need to know to get there? What are you going to get from me, and what are you going to get through your outside resources, and what additional education are you going to add, or your networking that you're going to do? And so what is their mindset around growth and their flexibility? Are they someone that like wants to spread their wings wide? They're very control oriented, and then when I come to them and ask them to go narrower and deeper, they're going to freak out and quit. That's not going to work well at a high growth organization that's going to get like deeper and deeper and deeper over time, right? And a lot of people are like that. They can get territorial about it. So to me, I'm going, no. Like, At Lunya, I can tell you that won't work, because as we get bigger, you know, I had 10 people, I had 45 people, I'm gonna have 110 people. You're not gonna have the same amount of wingspan as you did before, but it doesn't mean your job's less important, you know? And so what is their mindset around that kind of evolution, both for themselves and within an organization? And then Ikigai is another one that we have, and that's about having a positive mindset. So it's interesting because that was one that we set. The other three I had set earlier, and Ikigai is one that we added more recently, because I realized that mindset matters a lot. There's this really interesting metaphor about like hippos, tigers, and elephants. And there's an article about it, and they talk about like sort of the workforce using animals as metaphors. But the reality is hippos are not necessarily, they're kind of the people that can show up with a negative attitude. They're not bad people. There's nothing wrong with these people, but they can be really dangerous for an organization because they're people that are misaligned, or they're not bought in, or they're just looking for something different than what you can, you know, what you're going to offer them. So I think it's like, if I'm really honest about what the roles are and what the challenges are in the organization, and depending on how I'm kind of hearing that person respond to those challenges, I'm going, is this a person that's going to see my half full glass as, you know, as half full, or is this a person that's going to be like, you know, oh, it's half empty and here are all the problems? I'm like, if you want a problemless organization, let me know when you find it. And, you know, and I'm looking for someone to come in and be a real value add, and to do it with a good mindset. And is this that person? So those are our values of the company. And that's the sieve I put those 15-minute interviews through. And you'd be surprised. I mean, I can usually knock it down to like at least a third just off those interviews, just with those values in mind.
Wow. That's amazing. Thank you. Really quickly here, we have some hellos coming in that I want to address. It looks like we have Ricardo saying hello from Austin, Jarrell saying hello, Sergio from Brazil, Tom in Utah. Hi, Tom. Thank you for always tuning in. Octavio from Mexico, and another hello from Colombia. So a lot of hellos coming in here right now, Ashley. For those of you who are tuning in and haven't dropped a hello or haven't left a question yet, be sure to continue to do so. We have a couple questions to get to here, but at the end of our conversation, we are going to open it up to questions from the audience. And of course, we still want to see your hellos. We still want to know where you're tuning in from. So Ashley, going on to question number 9 here, Lunya is just one of several companies you founded or led or are involved with. You started Lago, as you said, which is the men's version of Lunya. Sodium bicarbonate is another one of your companies, an investment company, and you're also the chairwoman on the board of Outdoor Voices. What's the common vein between all of these companies? Like, in other words, what encouraged you to continue to build on in your entrepreneurial empire?
So this is hopefully not going to be too long-winded, but we'll go for it. When I talked about Ikigai is an exercise with these circles that overlap. And in the center of my Ikigai is, and people might have multiple, but for me, creative challenge comes up a lot. So I'm someone that's seeking that. It doesn't necessarily look like a title. It doesn't necessarily look the same at every company, but I love opportunities to have creative challenge. And so I think the idea of getting myself into sort of more than one of these is either I'm a crazy person, maybe I am that, but also I just like that challenge. It keeps me feeling alive. The thread, though, that's going between all of these organizations is, you know, NACO3 or sodium bicarbonate, our family office. The expression that we use is we invest in things that lift up humanity, make the world a better place. It's broad because, frankly, there's lots of really great ways to lift humanity up. Lunya is one that I think, like I said, I think we're really speaking to this important conversation. It's sort of balanced, but by another word, lifting up odium, helping people find happiness and joy in their life and prioritize it, make it feel meaningful and worthwhile. It's sort of the, you know, if I were jokingly to say it's the art of doing nothing, and then I would contrast that with Outdoor Voices, which I recently did have the opportunity to get involved with, which is all about doing things, which I think is really fun. And what got me excited about Outdoor Voices is, again, it's the mission. I think what's really amazing about Outdoor Voices is here's this brand that is kind of breaking down the performance barriers around activity and making activity something that's fun and not a like this thing that you can actually enjoy with friends or solo and have a good time. Their brand is colorful and engaging with a really strong community. And so I feel really lucky to have been able to be involved with that company. And I think they're making movement, something that everybody can enjoy. So loved that brand. And then The Deep, which is another one that I've been involved with, is about helping people have interesting conversations with each other. I think with the polarization that we've been seeing a lot in society, it's very dangerous. And I think that a lot of that is, we kind of get stuck in our own bubbles and we talk to people that think the same way we do. And so The Deep is this fascinating question journey to help nurture curiosity in people and hopefully help bring us back together. So if not go through it, there's a million things that I've been lucky enough to be involved in, and they all keep that creative challenge in me going. But hopefully a lot of really great investments that can help make the world better. And then in the meantime, there are things that keep me really engaged and excited.
Yeah, our final question here stems off of that, definitely. It's actually one of my favorite quotes that I've read from you, which is, you build up your professional strength by facing what scares you. It's just like a muscle. What does this allude to? Like, does this allude to your love? I know that this alludes to your love of working out, but how do you go about this? I mean, what scares you the most as a founder, and then how do you face that?
It changes constantly. So I think one of those things is, so I'm a parent. I have 2 kids, one's 6 and one's 7. And one of the things I always say is funny about it is, right when you think you're like, okay, I know how to do this, they get older. And then the challenge changes. Here I am again, feeling like I have no idea what's going on. Business has been the same for me. I think when the company was small, it needed one thing from me. And that thing that it needed from me is different than what it needs from me today. And that will be different a year from now. So just like my team, I'm faced with the same challenge. I have to evolve myself as quickly as this business is growing. So there's a lot of growth in there. And then some of it, I think, and I love working out, because one of the things I love working out, and it ties back to all of this, is that at the end of the day, you're never going to have all the answers, right? Like, we could spend our whole life trying to figure out can I become an expert in all things? Like, we can't, right? So some of it is me proving to myself that I can push through hard things and I can figure things out. And I would say fitness taught me that early on. I was an equestrian early on and an athlete all my life. And I think that, that act of continually pushing yourself to your edge, whether physically, emotionally, mentally, and then recognizing that you can overcome that edge, that is where confidence is born. It's born in the overcoming. And when you learn that you can overcome, that applies to everything in your life, And so for me, doesn't mean that tomorrow's not going to be a really hard day. I don't know what I'm doing, and that, like, nobody knows what they're doing because it hasn't been written yet. I haven't solved that problem yet, but I've done it enough now that I'll figure it out. And I have that kind of confidence in myself of just like, I'll figure it out. And if I can't do it, I'll find somebody that can. And I think that you get to a certain place with yourself where you push yourself through enough challenges and you can say that. And it feels
Yeah, I love that. We have some questions coming in here from the audience. Some more hellos from a hello from Memphis and a hello from Phoenix. Hello, thank you for tuning in. We're gonna go and hop into some Q&A questions coming in here from the audience. If you have questions, you can still ask them. We still have a little bit of time, but first I'm gonna get to, this may be a silly question, but how do you figure out which manufacturers have shorter lead times? Are you using a system or something for that?
Yeah, so I have a whole department that manages our production and our inventory. Honestly, the big determinants of lead time are, in my business, I would say, would be fabric. So am I buying pre-made fabric, or is this something I have to make? Is the yarn readily available or not? So for example, our fine wool that's coming out of Peru, we actually have to place orders for the yarn, and then we're having it, dye it, knit it, do all the different stages of it, and only then is it ready for me to start putting into product. So you can see where, like, a big piece of that timeline is around actually getting the raw materials and then the fabric materials. So in order to shorten your lead time, or your shortest lead times will be around if you can platform fabric, which for me means, is it a fabric that I use all the time? I can buy a lot of it and sit on it in maybe a grayish, which is like a undyed version of it, and then I can dye it up as I need it. That cuts a huge portion out of that lead time. Or is it something that's more readily available that my manufacturer is just okay to have, they're going to sit on it. And then, so that's one portion of it. And then the other portion of it is, have I set aside time in my sewers factory? So do they know that the product's coming, or am I waiting behind other people that they have to finish their orders first? So kind of like literally reserving the space in the sewers so that I can expedite it. And in some cases, it means flying some percentage of my order in faster and boating the rest of it. So there's also a question of proximity to the eventual 3PL or warehouse that it's going to end up. So those are all the factors that I think would play into it. And they're all levers you can pull depending on your cash position, your confidence in that fabric, the manufacturers you work with, and kind of like the mode of transportation. All those different factors play into lead time.
Of course, of course. Another question here that I like, because I've done the same. I've purchased Lunya at Nordstrom. How did you partner with them? What went into this?
So Nordstrom, we've been talking with Nordstrom for a long time, and I had been really unsure, to be honest. We're a direct-to-consumer brand, and branching into wholesale in such a big way as Nordstrom, it was scary territory. They've been a great partner for us, though, and I think they're helping bring awareness of our product to a new customer base, and it's been really great.
Yeah. Let's see here. Oh, do you guys have physical locations? Were those impacted by COVID, and will you continue to have physical locations if so?
Yes.
Good question.
So yes to everything, but yes, we have physical locations. Yes, they were impacted. They were closed for the vast majority of last year. And even when they reopened, there was it was touch and go most of the time. So we're finally at a place, I think our stores are more stably open. We have an Atlanta store, and we have a New York store that's in Nolita. And we're in the process of opening a bunch of new stores. So you can probably expect to see stores from us that are coming in Texas, San Francisco, Chicago, Boston, and Los Angeles.
That's awesome. This question coming in, stemming off of your discussion on D2C, what targets or expectations have you set in your mix between D2C sales versus distribution?
So most of our company is, it's D2C online, I would say.
Right.
And I do expect wholesale to be a huge portion of us. I think we'll pick select partners. Like you saw, Nordstrom was a partner that it took us a long time that we worked with them. And so we're picking select partners that we think really speak to our audience and can help introduce our product to a new customer base. And so, probably a handful of those. I don't know exactly the percentage of what it'll be in a year, but we have targets throughout the year. And then brick and mortar, I love brick and mortar. I still love it. I think it has a place. I think it's going to change. That experience will change over time, though. And I think we'll be looking for and expecting different things out of brick and mortar. My favorite thing out of brick and mortar is actually, if I think about the stores I still go into the brick and mortar, is what is the store experience like? Is it cool? Is it a place I want to check out? And is there new products that's coming in? What was the sales experience like? And then oftentimes I use that as an opportunity to get to know somebody and maintain relationships. I have salespeople that I know at my 5 favorite stores, and they text me when new things come in, or if I need a present on the fly, they'll walk out to an Uber, throw it in an Uber, and it shows up at me. So I think it also gives you an opportunity to have a much more high-touch experience with the brand. So yeah, definitely a fan.
Well, Ashley, thank you so much. There was so much in here. You had such great insight. Really exciting to hear about your journey with Lunya and every other company that you're working with. We just appreciate you joining us today. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been super fun.
Awesome. And for all of you tuning in, as always, thank you for doing so. We always appreciate your hellos. We appreciate that you're tuning in from all different areas of the world, and we always look forward to participating with you. And please continue to do so. We'll actually be back next week with the CEO of Growers Secret, Chaz Berman. That's happening on Monday, April 12th at 2 p.m. Pacific. So tune in and we'll see you then.